If I'm only measuring success by way of can I retire at 55, that means I only get to tell myself I did it one time. All right, welcome to Money Therapy. We are glad that you are joining us today for our next installment. I'm Brandon Chasteen.
I'm Bill McGill.
And really today's conversation, I mean, we're going to tie it to finance because that's why we're all here, to just become better financial stewards and have a better relationship with money. But this really is applicable to everything. In show prep, we were talking, I was like, this is, if we can do this with finance, we can surely do it with our businesses and even with our family, with our fitness goals. With everything. And we've talked about this. There's another episode that is on micro actions.
Yeah.
There's another episode where we talk about measuring results and how we want to celebrate even the smallest progress. And we're talking about it really, again, we're talking about those small actions, those micro actions.
Yeah.
Because it's so important. I have people come to me all the time, and they're basically overwhelmed because what they're facing or what they're trying to accomplish is so big, and they feel kind of frozen.
Yeah.
And typically, I think that my job oftentimes is just to sit and listen, right? Like empathetically listen to them, but then just say, okay, well, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the very next thing to do is this.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, why don't we just like try to ignore all the other stuff and just go do this and come back when you get that done.
Yeah.
So micro actions, what you got?
Yeah, my first initial thought is I know that I quote Jordan Peterson a lot on the podcast, but
Too much.
Too
We're
much?
gonna have to start paying him.
Really?
Probably.
That would be awesome.
What you got?
But he talks about this a lot, and he frames it in a way of negotiating with yourself, which is kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. But he'll say basically the same thing, like start with the next best step, no matter how small it is, that you actually would do. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, it does me no good we were talking about this in last episode, or maybe the episode before that, of, you need to put 20% away for retirement or X goal. And the person currently is not putting 0% away for that goal. Are they willing to put 20% away? I mean, some are, some aren't, right? But maybe, hey, can I put 1% away? Mm-hmm. And that negotiation with yourself is really important. And I've always found that interesting how he frames it that way. Like, because you can talk a big game and you can say, I'm going to do all these things, but a lot of times that's how you become overwhelmed.
Sure.
And we've talked about, focusing on the process, focusing on the days instead of the decades. And these are so intertwined, kind of like we said, with so many other things other than just personal finance, but they all help and feed into one another.
If you continue to quote Jordan Peterson, can you imitate his voice?
I don't think anybody wants that.
I think we need to try it. You need rehearse it.
You want me to try it?
Rehearse it before next time.
Well, I'll give it a try. I mean,
you think you can do it?
I mean, if we're going to tank this podcast,
no,
we
let's
should
not do it today. Why don't you rehearse it? Just next time you quote him, you have to say it in his voice.
Okay. That's not an easy impression to do.
It's not. I find his voice very soothing to listen to, though.
It's
I do enjoy
nice.
The
it's
way
like,
he sounds.
God, I just want everyone to talk to me like that.
All right. So, really, like one of the things, like in the Sunday series email, we paint a picture. We tell a story really of a lady who went from zero experience in a corporate job. No, I'm sorry. She had a corporate job. She had zero experience in her endeavor.
Yeah.
And she left her job and launched what she was accomplishing very, very successfully. And it's a true story. And the fact of the matter is how she did it was one small step at a time.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite parts of this story is her very, very first action. This lady decided she wanted to publish a cookbook.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you do that? It's overwhelming. Like, how do I leave this corporate job as a consultant
Yeah.
and publish a cookbook? And every time she started to explore the process, it became more and more overwhelming.
Yeah.
Oh, I need a publisher. Oh, I need an agent. Oh, I need this. Oh, I need this. And it turns out that the first thing that she ended up doing once she realized she needed an agent was, how in the world do you, again, corporate consultant, never ever published anything, never wrote anything. How do you find an agent? She was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go down to the bookstore and I'm going to just read cookbooks and look for where they shout out, like in the bios or whatever.
Yeah.
Thanks to my agent, so and so. And she made a list of people that were thanked as agents, and she started doing research.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Pretty brilliant.
She's pretty successful now. So I always I've heard this term before. This isn't my own, but I love to call these, and we all do this, right? We have these, I call them BHAGs. Again, not my word. I've heard that before, but BHAGs are big, hairy, audacious goals, right? And the whole idea is oftentimes we have these big things in our life that we want to accomplish. Mm-hmm. These big, hairy, audacious goals tend to be something we're very interested in. Like we want to accomplish these things. We're passionate about them.
Yeah.
And so they matter. And because they're so big and because they matter so much, we quickly get overwhelmed, anxious, and sometimes we even get frozen. Instead of being able to take action, we are just paralyzed.
Yeah.
Right. So what we have to do is break these things down into micro actions. So from a financial planning perspective,
Yeah.
I've applied this to my practice, and oftentimes my clients will develop this big financial plan with these, steps to accomplish all these life goals and things. But at the end of the day, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to extract 3 steps. These next 3 steps are all I want you to focus on right now.
Yeah.
And as soon as you check them off, come back and we'll have a next appointment, and I'll pull the next 3 steps out.
Yeah.
Right? What's your thoughts?
No, that's exactly what I do as well. It's something I've learned also in the industry, when I was kind of bright and green and just at a, broker boot camp, if you want to call it that. You have a need to, sort of impress your clients or potential clients that you're meeting with. And I learned very, very quickly that I can't give these people, we can't talk about 10 things and then I'll say, okay, we need to meet again. I can talk about 10 things, probably need to talk about less than 10 things. But at the end of that appointment, I tell them now, I'm going to give you 3 things that we can act upon at the end of this thing that's going to give you more options, make you better off in your personal financial situation, or just move the needle. So whether that's opening an account or establishing an emergency fund or figuring out what they're spending, we're going to do steps 1, 2, and 3. We're going to get to retirement and building wealth and the lake house and, buying a restaurant or whatever it is down the road. But right now we gotta start saving money, or we gotta figure out what's in your bank account. Right. And you gotta start. That's how small you have to start.
Yeah.
And that's just how human beings are hardwired anyway. We tend to remember in groups of 3. So as a coach, as a professional, I play to that. And I play to that because that's going to be the most efficient use of my time and the client's time. And we're going to make the most progress doing that.
I think sometimes we've adapted to where we need to, sometimes we expect to feel overwhelmed. I think sometimes like our approach to just like, hey, handle these three things. I had a pretty recent client experience, and the story is wild, but one of the things that like it came down to was I gave this person like I was like, here, go, let's accomplish these three things. And they went and got a second opinion. And the second opinion person gave them like an 83-page financial plan,
Oh my gosh.
right? So my financial plan is one page.
Yeah.
It's one page. Now let me make sure I'm clear. What I have is 100 pages
Yeah.
of information and data, and
You could give them 83
and I
pages.
could, but I extrapolate the most critical,
Yes.
and I present one page.
Yeah.
Okay. And on that one page is one section that is next steps, and it's checkbox number 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Okay. So at the top of my one page is your financial statement of purpose.
Yeah.
Then we have goals listed.
Sure.
And then I have next steps. And then we also have like a snapshot of your financial vital signs and your net worth,
Yeah.
like kind of a tracker. And so it doesn't mean that there's a lack of homework. It's just this is what you need to focus on.
Sure.
We talked about what we learned from this industry. There's a statistic out there that in a full financial plan, okay, and most financial plan templates are relatively the same. There's nuances between planning software where some's like goal based and some's cash flow based, and some you have more control for like inputs like inflation and growth, and some are controlled by Morningstar benchmarks or whatever the case. So there's all these nuances from planning software to planning software, but at the end of the day, typically in a financial plan, it's a very, very similar template, and typically they're about 80 pages long.
Yeah.
So in 80 pages worth, like statistically in our industry, if I give you a financial plan, you're going to implement less than 8% of that financial plan. 8% is the average of what gets implemented. So to put this in perspective, I have a friend who is in this industry. He does business a certain way. The business that he runs is very good. He's very good at his job. I just don't tend to agree with everything he does, and that's why my business is different. He's a very trustworthy guy, though. But for his financial plan, that's the product that he delivers. He charges well over $10,000 for a plan. Okay. And it's, again, very robust. If you implement everything in the plan, you're going to be you're going to be better. Okay. Yeah. The problem is we already know statistically only about 8% of that $10,000+ plan is going to be implemented.
Yeah.
Right. By people. And so we're only going to have about 8% impact. That's wow. That's so much money to spend on what would only be 8% solution.
Yeah.
Right. So what this is just to drive home how important it is to break things down and to extrapolate important things to next steps.
Yeah.
Those small micro actions.
Yeah.
And again, it just drives home like the process is more important than the plan.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a lot on the financial planning piece there. But I really, really think it's important to understand that if your plan is just big, you're going to get overwhelmed. And it's only when we can start breaking these things down into small and accomplishable tasks that we're going to make any progress.
Well, what happened with your prospective client that got a second opinion? I mean,
so they called me and they were very, very sincerely nice, and I appreciate it. They called me and said, "Hey, you didn't give us a lot of information," because this was a big change to their situation in life. Like it was very, very big.
Sure.
And I think honestly, if I'm being real candid, like I think I made some assumptions that because we were already working together, they understood my process, and maybe they didn't understand to the point that I thought they did.
Sure.
But they called me and said, "Hey, we actually think we're going to take this other guy up on his thing, and we're going to do it his way, and we appreciate everything you've done for us." And I just told him, I was like, how about you come in and let me look through the document with you, just to make sure. Like I was like, I'll give you, if it's good, I'll give you the blessing. And his plan was good. It wasn't bad. But over the next week between that call and the appointment that we had, they kept calling to ask questions, because it was a very big decision for them. And I had, I was not jealous or not envious of their situation, because they had to make a pretty quick decision, and it was very profound.
Yeah.
But they kept calling through the week, and every time they'd call, they would be asking questions about the information I had on my 1-page document.
Yeah.
Not the 80-page.
Yeah.
And so finally, like 3 or 4 days into this week, I was like, you've called me about 7 times already this week, and the question keeps being about my 1-page document, not the 80-page plan. And I was like, how much of that 80-page plan have you looked through yet? And he was like, well, we looked at a couple pages.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you understand therein lies the problem? And so sure enough, like they're continuing to work with me.
Yeah.
Because I think we connected some dots and they understood. And again, my oversight, my assumption was they did understand beforehand. We're always learning and growing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But the really cool thing is, or the really funny thing is we just had another follow-up meeting recently. And in the meeting, I was like, okay, you guys got the 3 things accomplished. Now here's a new list of 3 things. And the husband was like, well, we need to talk about this, 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 and this. And I was like, look, you're so ingrained in needing to feel overwhelmed. Like nobody has ever wanted to just be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right? It's only because we've lived in this world long enough to understand that the world almost necessitates us to feel overwhelmed all the time.
Yeah.
That we just expect it.
Yeah.
So when somebody actually presents something that's simple and achievable, we're just like, wait a second, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah. You're not addressing everything.
So all of a sudden he starts spitting out these other things, and I was like, look, like, and I pulled up my big plan that I see, the parts where all the pieces are put, and I was like, look, it's already on the list.
Yeah.
But we're putting the cart before the horse to go here and address this first. This is your next step.
Yeah.
I want you to go and I want you to accomplish these things.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do, call me. We'll get you back in, and I'll give you 3 more things.
Yeah.
And I think he's finally starting to see, like,
because when we gave you 100 things, you looked at a couple of pages.
right.
Exactly.
And so I'm only going to do. And here's the thing: is ever since I've given them 3 things to do,
Yeah.
they're knocking those 3 things to do out like in a few days.
Yeah.
Right. We're getting so much accomplished because they're not overwhelmed.
And now they're feeling the progress.
And
They're
they're-
actually like feeling the momentum, and
Yeah.
they feel like, hey, we are making progress here.
Yeah,
We are
so-
getting ahead.
I think, and this is just kind of almost a realization I've had during this podcast, is like,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we need to realize, like, we don't have to be overwhelmed, and we can accomplish really big, grand things.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes I feel like the human experience conditions us to feel certain ways about certain things.
Yeah.
Like, to talk about money is it feels weird.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's ever, like, that's not in our DNA.
Yeah.
That's just part of, like, we've learned that, we've been conditioned that way. So
Yeah.
let's break that cycle.
Yeah.
And I think too is, if you go into something and you're just like, I don't have to be overwhelmed. This is big,
Yeah.
but I can do this. And I'm not like trying to present like big things aren't going to be hard, or you're not going to have like ups and downs. If
Sure.
you're starting a business, this lady that went out and like published a cookbook, like, I'm sure her sales were terrible in the beginning, and that was probably stressing her out. Like, she probably spent a lot of money getting this thing up and running, and now it's not like growing as fast as you want, or it did tick up and then it ticked back down.
Yeah.
Like, nothing happens in a straight line.
Yeah.
But so when I'm not trying to present like, hey, we've cracked the code to just immediate, immense success in an easy way.
Yeah.
What I am saying though is that whether, like, when it comes to your fitness, I don't want to go run a marathon tomorrow.
Yeah.
I want small increment. I want to wake up and I want to run tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point. What I love about that is that by keeping it simple, you're standing out as a financial planner and a professional, because when you talk about the client being overwhelmed and being conditioned in a society that's always selling something to people. I mean, that's really an aspect of it is, oh, you have a problem over here, we can fix that. Or you have a problem over here, we can fix that too. And that sense of urgency leads to that person coming in to a financial review or interview, deciding whether to hire you or not.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, I have all these things, all these problems I got to fix. And they do.
Right.
Like, they are legitimate problems. And what I like about it is, instead of being the people that, and, not saying anything, it's a lot of times about who's a better fit, right? But instead of being part of the machine of just like giving them 83 pages and solving all of their problems, and look, I can solve every problem. That's also a part of that same machine. And they're still overwhelmed when they get out of that thing. They may have confidence in that person, like, oh man, that person was really smart. They understood my needs. That's all very important. But you're standing out by just delivering. I understand all of that, but I also understand human behavior and human emotion.
Yeah.
And I understand that this doesn't work. Like this, we have all the data in the world to say that none of that works. And so we're going to do this differently. And we're going to start with step 1. Then we're going to do step 2, then 3. And then once you start feeling that momentum, we're going to address the next problem. And when you look up in a year, I promise you're either going to be in a starkly different position than you are today, or at the very least, we're going to build in more options for you. I've said it before. If we're doing our jobs right, we're giving people more options. When you have more options, typically you're in a better spot than you were. And I think that comes down to measuring that success.
Yeah.
Success isn't always, what are my investment returns? What is the market doing? A lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with, where were you a year from now and where are you today?
Yeah.
And are we making the decisions and taking the right 1, 2, 3 steps to get to our larger future and things? That's a plan, in my opinion, not an 83-page document. But
Do you know who's good at incremental progress?
Jordan Peterson,
One of our sponsors. We're going to take a quick break. Listen to this sponsor. A few years ago, I had the privilege of working with a wonderful couple that had big goals and an incredible work ethic. They made sacrifices and achieved tremendous success and even got to enjoy an early retirement. But tragically, the wife passed away after just 6 months of that retirement life. This experience shook me to the core and led me to reevaluate how I approach financial planning with my clients. I developed an ideology based on 5 pillars of fitness and happiness, and in no particular order, the pillars of finance, faith, physical and emotional well-being, and mental health. While I'm not a doctor, priest, or psychologist, I believe in the importance of addressing all of these pillars holistically alongside financial fitness. A few months ago, I decided to prioritize my own physical health. I focused on everything from eating well to sleeping better. However, I really struggled to find the right motivation to become a regular at the gym. That's when I reached out to an old friend and fitness professional, Sean Rodman. Sean has been a warfighter in the U.S. Army for 20 years. While serving, he acquired all kinds of fitness certificates and was designated to lead fitness programs for our nation's bravest warriors. Not just the fittest ones heading off to war, but also those injured and needing rehabilitation. When he retired, he started an online fitness company, Parabellum Fitness. He builds workout programs tailored to you, your goals, and even considers your old injuries. He also switches things up from week to week or month to month, so nothing ever gets old. In just a few months, I've experienced better sleep, improved mobility, increased energy, weight loss, and freedom from my old injuries. While I want my clients to achieve incredible financial success, I believe it's all for nothing if you cannot enjoy it. Go check out parabellumfitnessllc.com. That's parabellumfitnessllc.com. Follow them on Instagram or TikTok really any social media platform, go follow Parabellum Fitness and reach out to Sean. Set up your first month of programming, mention Money Therapy, and get 25% off. Let's not lose sight of all 5 pillars. Together, let's focus on health and happiness and put energy into creating the best possible life we can. After all, we only get one. All right. So you mentioned measuring success it is such a critical piece to micro actions.
Yeah.
For a couple reasons. One of the reasons is inside of micro actions, what's really cool is if you are doing the right thing by like breaking things down into small steps and you're measuring incremental results.
Yeah.
You can also see the impact and understand where you're being most efficient and what might be potentially wasting time. Like, for example, there's, for my business, one of the most effective things that I can do, one, for client satisfaction, two, for revenue growth, is to, be in front of my clients.
Yeah.
To make phone calls, to have meetings, right? It's so important to do that.
Sure.
Sometimes I'm like, oh, I have an idea and I want to introduce this idea to a whole bunch of clients. So I'm going to make a list.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so the list might be this incremental, this small step, right? The micro action. I'm going to make a list of who I'm going to call.
Yeah.
Well, so I make a list and then I measure my results.
Yeah.
Did my client satisfaction change at all from my list?
Yeah.
No, it didn't. They didn't know I made a list.
Yeah.
Did my revenue change because of my list? No, it didn't. So was making a list a good micro action, or would it have been better just to like start picking up the phone and making calls? I'm using this as an example because what I'm trying to say is sometimes when we have a series of small things, sometimes the small things are more of distractions.
Yeah.
Right? That we create because we're avoiding the thing we don't necessarily want to do, or the thing, in a sense, like sometimes making phone calls is hard to do. Like sometimes you just don't want to talk all day.
Yeah.
I'm on a podcast talking all day, but
yeah.
Sometimes you don't want to, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, man, like I don't want to make calls today. So instead I'm going to make a list of people that I'm going to call tomorrow.
Right.
Waste of time.
Yeah.
And if I'm measuring results of my micro actions, I would immediately know, hey, that didn't help my clients.
Yeah.
It didn't help my business grow. It didn't hit the bottom line.
Yeah.
Like none of that matters.
Sure.
So guess what I'm going to do?
Yeah.
I'm going to never make a list again.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is a waste of time. So I think measuring success, measuring incremental success is important. And also too is realize, like, if my goal might be retirement at 55.
Yeah.
Okay. If my goal is retirement at 55. If I'm only measuring success by way of can I retire at 55, that means I only get to tell myself I did it one time.
Yeah.
Right. But if I break it down into all these micro actions and measure progress by way of like, is my net worth growing or my accounts growing? What I love though is oftentimes what I see is, let's say I need, $4 million to retire at 55. Total example. I don't know the math especially for everyone listening, but let's just throw that out there. If that's the case, maybe I need my net worth to grow by $100,000 a year between now and 55.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know, based on my risk tolerance, I can assume that most of my investments are going to grow at 8% a year. Right. So with that growth, how much do I actually need to contribute to my retirement accounts? Well, I need to contribute $50K to my retirement or investment accounts, we'll call them.
Okay.
All right. What's really fun, right, is we know when we say like 8% return for retirement, like we're talking about averages.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty clear to everyone. So like inside of that, if I know that I need to try to achieve like an 8% return, and I come to you and I'm like, Bill, like we only got 6% this year. Like, totally failing.
Yeah.
I'm missing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you're like, well, Brandon, you also said you were going to contribute $50,000 from working hard and saving your money, but Instead, you bought a boat and you did this and this, and you only saved $10,000.
Yeah.
Well, the problem isn't that. The problem is we're always really quick to focus on the things that we tend to have less control over and blame them for our progress or lack of progress.
Yeah.
When, to your point, what you were saying, like if we're truly measuring like net worth, and we have several sub goals of like contributing to my retirement, or investment accounts. I want to, add an addition to my house so my home value improves. I want to pay down my debt aggressively so my net worth goes up from the reduction of debt.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that we can do.
Yeah.
And yes, we do want, if we plan for our accounts to grow at 6 or 7 or 8% annualized average return, we want to try to accomplish that.
Yeah.
But if in a year, like last year when the accounts were down, that was out of everyone's control. Mm-hmm. But guess what happened when accounts were down like that because of a bad market? You know what else wasn't happening? People were running the other way, right? What'd you say a couple episodes ago?
I'm in the only industry in the world that when there's a sale, people run the opposite direction.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where like, all of a sudden, like everything's going down and people are like, well, the market's down. My plan's derailed. Well, no, just put what you said you were going to put into your investments. Stick to the plan.
Yeah.
And if you stick to the plan, we've planned for bad years and great years, and you just got to do your part too. And we got to hold ourselves accountable to what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And understand we only have control. So typically in my plans, like I don't really measure year to year returns as success or failure. And that's that's not for everyone. Not everyone loves that.
Yeah.
Right. But I set multiple like criterias of what success looks like.
Yeah.
And now if the average annual return is slipping below our targets, then we got to make some adjustments. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think measuring results is so important, but it keeps us on track. It lets us know when we're wasting time or wasting energy, but it also helps. We should be patting ourselves on the back for the progress that we do make and not having to wait till one time 20 years from now.
Yeah.
To pat ourselves on the back. So
yeah.
What's your thoughts?
I think it's well said. I think we wrap up from here.
Cool. Big, hairy, audacious goals. Guys, if you're listening and you feel overwhelmed, join the club. We all do. What you got to do is step back and say, what can I do next? What do I have the power to control? What can I do next? And that's it. Do it.
See y'all next week.
Later, guys. We hope you learned something valuable today. We appreciate you including us in your journey towards financial betterment. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes only and not to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions about how it might be uniquely applicable to you, please discuss that with a financial professional, or, of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you about your specific questions, needs, or circumstances. We welcome you to reach out to us via our website, harpethwealthpartners.com, or by emailing Brandon at bmc@harpethwealthpartners.com. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not to be intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult appropriate qualified professionals prior to making a decision. Investing includes risk, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. We want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you back next week.